you over here. Okay. So this morning's prayer I chose from Marion White Edelman. Let us pray. Oh God, I thank you for this day of life, for eyes to see the sky, for ears to hear the birds, for feet to walk amidst the trees, for hands to pick the flowers of the earth, for a sense of smell to breathe in the sweet perfumes of nature, for a mind to think about and appreciate the magic of everyday miracles, for a spirit to swell in joy at your mighty presence everywhere. Amen.
Um,
Hey, John.
Hello. Sorry, I'm not sure if I'm even on.
Yep,
You're on.
you are. We can
Okay.
see you. We can hear you. It's all good. Are you having connectivity issues today?
I was having trouble getting my into my work email, which gets the link for this. And
Oh, I should change it then. I didn't even realize that. I can switch it to your personal email. I'm sorry about that. It should.
that would be good. That would be
Yeah,
helpful.
I apologize. I set it up so long ago and didn't even pay attention to it, and I just copy and paste every week. So let me fix that so that you don't have to keep. It shouldn't go to your work email. I apologize for that. All right. Well, it's good to see everybody. Today we're going to pick up at Job 18, and we revisit our buddy Bildad the Shuhite. And so I thought it might be helpful just to go back and remind ourselves of the conversation or the monologue he had that he directed at Job back in chapter 8. And this is just a portion thereof, verses 5 and 6, where Bildad says to Job, "If you will seek God and make supplication to the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore to you your rightful place. Though your beginning was small, your latter days will be great." So we get this, sort of a reminder of Bildad's worldview. And, for Kim, who just started with Job last week, just a reminder that Job has these three friends who are sort of interlocutors, who Job will make his complaint, and then in sequence, various of each of his three friends will make a speech basically telling Job how wrong and immoral and unjust, you had to have done something wrong to bring this about yourself. And to Fred's point, there is some repetition in this theme that we keep exploring. It's the poor horse is kind of dead.
So is this person, is Bildad one of the comforters?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
But it sounds like he's saying there's hope for you, right? Your latter days will be very great. I don't know,
It's all contingent on this if. So that's the last time we saw him 10 chapters ago, was in chapter 8. And so we'll see Bildad again today. And so the question I'm suggesting we think about as we read chapter 18 and then chapter 19, Job has his rebuttal, as tends to happen. That seems to be the rhythm. But, as we read chapter 18, let's think about in Bildad's economy, in his understanding of the world, what do morality and justice look like? Because I think that's going to help us understand his point of view toward Job. So let me, okay, there we go. Oh, before we start chapter 18, was there anything left over from 17 we need to revisit, or are we good? I think we kind of exhausted 17. Okay. Would somebody like to read?
And vice versa.
Yeah. It's a mutual thing. Let me get rid of this guy here. These pop-ups make it hard to see the screen. Would somebody like to read chapter 18, which is 21 verses of Bildad the Shuhite?
Sure.
Thank you.
Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, When will you end these speeches? Be sensible, and then we can talk. Why are we regarded as cattle and considered stupid in your sight? You who tear yourself to pieces in your anger, is the earth to be abandoned from their place? The lamp of a wicked man is snuffed out, the flame of his fire stops burning. The light in his tent becomes dark, the lamp beside him goes out. The vigor of his step is weakened, his own schemes are thrown down. His feet thrust him into a net, he wanders into its mesh. A trap seizes him by the heel, a snare holds him fast, lies in his path. Terrors startle him on every side and dog his every step. Calamity is hungry for him, disaster is ready for him when he falls. It eats away parts of his skin, death's firstborn devours his limbs. He is torn from the security of his tent and marched off to the king of terrors. Fire resides in his tent, burning sulfur is scattered over his dwelling. His roots dry up below and his branches wither above. The memory of him perishes from the earth. He has no name in the land. He is driven from light into the realm of darkness and is banished from the world. He has no offspring or descendants among his people, no survivor where he once lived. People of the West are appalled at his fate. Those of the East are seized with horror. Surely such is the dwelling of an evil man, such is the place of one who does not know God.
Thank you, Fred. So again, we're reading from a variety of translations here, which is great. As Fred was reading, were there any words, phrases, figures of speech that were different in your translation or what's on the screen than from what Fred was reading? Because that might be an interesting place to start. Okay, I hear nothing. Then where do we want to go with Bildad? What is Bildad saying?
Yep.
I think Bildad is taking the gloves off here.
Okay,
You know, this
what does that look
this
like?
is not a sort of generalized, not a generalized thing that, you know, goes down. You know, as he goes on, he gets right into what is.
I think I am frozen. Hang on.
He isn't one of the evil and wicked ones. So quit kvetching about this and trying to find explanations.
Well, no, I mean his skin is being eaten away. His roots dry up. His
And
his
he's left
children.
without descendants, certainly.
Yeah, he's stuck without descendants. You know, his name disappears. Remember, the name is a critically important part of that culture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, knowing somebody's name gives you power. To lose your name is, you know, is like losing yourself. He's no longer saying this in a general sense. He's looking at Job and saying, you know, if this is you, it's because you're evil. And quit calling me a cow.
My study Bible tends to reinforce Fred, where the footnote says Bildad's system of reward and retribution makes no exception for Job, who must be guilty.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
Well,
Job's memory has not perished from the earth. Here we are, millennia later, reading about him. Ray, were you about to say something? I'm sorry.
no, I wasn't.
Okay.
Apparently I had it backward, but not unusual.
So what does morality and what do morality and justice look like according to Bildad the Shuhite?
Well, it seems to come with a bushel of retribution.
Hmm.
And I mean, existential retribution at the level of just destroying the person as if he never lived.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I guess he thinks that people get what they deserve, but I see in my Bible, which is the same as the one on the screen, at the beginning, Bildad says, "How long will you hunt for words?
Mm-hmm.
And when, and then when shall we speak?" And then in the verse 5, it gets into third person, and that's kind of confusing, I think. It seems like he's talking about more people, some other people besides Job,
Yeah.
and generalizing about them. But I guess he's still saying you get what you deserve.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Like-
is moving from, you to, the more general, the they type language is a little bit taking it easy on Job, not saying, your fire stops burning, your calamity is not hungry for you necessarily, but at the same time, when he's just going down the list of what's happened to Job.
Yeah.
which is another way of convicting Job in his mind. It's also reads to me like all of these punishments from 5 down seem like a kind of a mandatory sentencing. You do this, this is what's going to happen. This is in the divine plan. There is no mercy or judgment or discretion involved. It's all or one.
Well, there is no appeal.
Yeah.
If God decides to punish you, one, it's because you deserve it. And 2, there's nothing you can do about it.
And remember, I don't remember if it was in chapter 16 or 17 last week, but do you remember what Job wanted more than anything?
Wanted to be told why he was being
Yeah,
punished.
but in addition to that, he wanted someone to stand with him as his advocate, to, really to defend him before God. And it's pretty clear that's not going to happen, at least according to Bildad.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is, why do you think we're so foolish for forming this opinion? All of the evidence of what God, would do is against you. Here it is. Because this is what God does to evil people. And then he's kind of listing all of these things that have affected Job to say, what else would I believe? Why are you coming to me with this, ridiculousness of, that I don't know something. I know something. I see it happening. So
Does somebody have a different reading of, for is the earth to be abandoned for your sake?
Which verse are you at?
4.
Oh, 4.
You who tear yourself to pieces in anger, is the earth to be abandoned for your sake?
Let's see what the Hebrew says. Let's see.
Yeah, new bathroom.
Exactly. Leave, lose, forsake, deserted. Restore or repair is another possible translation of that verb, which is interesting.
Well, I just want, is he talking about is all of morality to be upset for your sake, or earth would seem to be a the wrong term to me if I were trying to write
Oh,
this.
so it's the word earth that you're looking at. Okay, hang on, let me see. Yep, it land. Sorry. Golly. Move that.
Hey, your mouse is giving you fits too.
Um, um,
Urgh.
is really the earth in terms of like the soil, the ground, the land itself. Um, so he's, oh, here comes Ellie. So, you raise an excellent question, Fred, because he's asking, you know, it's like the foundation, the shaking of the foundations, right? Should everything that the world and the moral framework and our understanding of how the universe works, should that all come crumbling down because of you? So in other words, if Job were somehow to be exonerated or did not receive this, you know, chain of this
Justice.
cascade of punishments, then um, then that would call into question, everything would come tumbling down. Is really what he's questioning. Hey, Ellie, how are you?
Sorry, I'm late.
All right.
Breakfast went long.
Where are you?
We're in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We had an all-American weekend with baseball and more fireworks than you can shake a stick at. It was great.
Oh, fun. I love traveling with you vicariously.
Thank you.
Ah. So we are in chapter 18 with Job's buddy Bildad. And we were saying at the outset, Fred said it, and I think several of us agreed that we're starting to hear some repetition in these speeches.
Mm.
So we may begin to move a little bit more swiftly through these chapters. But I don't want to shortchange the conversation if there are things we want to talk about. And
I,
Jake, I didn't say hello to you. You slipped in. I'm so glad you're here. I hope the doctor's appointment went okay. Um,
I
Ray,
have one different translation at verse 11 that is more direct, and I'll read it anyhow.
please.
The terror at verse 11, the terrors of death suddenly beset him and make him piss all over his feet.
I like that.
It's good.
That's evocative. I like the
It-
earthiness of that.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting that I don't know if the Hebrew actually reads that way or not, but it's
Let's find
if it
out.
does and we bowdlerized it, I think that's funnier yet.
Let's see. All around terrors frighten him and harry him at every step. Let's see.
Boy.
Poots.
And if it isn't, then it's just a vulgar insert from the translators of the New English.
Well,
The
it's
overflow.
interesting because one of the translation of poots is to flow or overflow. So depending on what's flowing, I guess I think maybe that's how that translator took it. I love that. That's a fabulous translation. Yeah, that's much better than chase them at their heels. Um, let's see. We have a couple of footnotes here. At 12, their strength is consumed by hunger. Let's see what the other possible read is. Disaster is hungry for them. So that's very different because it sounds like disaster is chasing them as opposed to them wasting away.
Jurassic Park.
Hunger. And then 13, by disease, their skin is consumed. Alternate translation, it consumes the limbs of his skin. Okay.
Mm.
All right. The firstborn of death consumes their limbs. What do you think about that phrase? Does anyone have anything different there at the second part of verse 13?
Who is the firstborn of death?
I have in the study Bible, there's a footnote that says it might better be written as death the firstborn, which apparently may be Canaanite mythology.
Mm.
So, realizing that it's anachronistic, I'm just going to name that at the outset, to bring Jesus into Job. But think about our Eucharistic prayer, where Jesus is described as the firstborn of all creation, the head of the church and the author of our salvation. That just keeps echoing in my head. So, in the Canaanite mythology and in this worldview that to which Bildad subscribes, death is the firstborn. Opposing, in Christianity, Jesus is understood as the firstborn. That and a couple of bucks will get you on the metro, but I just think it's an interesting comparison or juxtaposition. Anything else here?
I think that the last verse, such is the place of those who do not know God, is so incredibly arrogant. I mean, he's saying you don't know anything about God. You don't understand anything, and I do.
Mm-hmm.
And if you did, you'd know you were getting what you deserve.
Yeah.
Slightly different
Yeah.
translation,
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Ray.
a slightly different translation.
Good.
Such is the fate of the dwellings of evildoers and of the homes of those who care nothing for God.
Who care nothing. Okay.
Mm.
Let's
And
see
if-
what the Greek says. Oops. Yeah, did I say Greek? I meant Hebrew. The Hebrew verb is yada, which is know, and that's almost like that sexual or marital knowing. It's an intimate knowledge. It's not intellectual. Um, so
Nor is it emotional, which care nothing would imply to me. I mean,
yeah. So that knowing God is up close and personal, really being
thank you.
in relationship with God. And so, to
Helpful.
Donna's point, how arrogant of Bildad to say, Job, you don't know God at all. And just to go back for a second to verse 4, which Fred, shined a light on earlier. Shall the earth be forsaken because of you, or the rock be removed out of its place? This whole idea that for Bildad, Job's questioning seems to threaten the very foundation on which his understanding of right and wrong, morality, justice, etc., is based. It's like, maybe that's something behind this vitriol. The strength of his argument against Job is that, Job, how dare you question this? Right? This is how it is. Period. Full stop. Black, white. End of question. End of discussion. Um, and Job keeps, at the but why? But why? Someone stand up for me. I haven't done anything. And that persistence is, I think, threatening to Bildad.
Now that I think it's very threatening, because back then, law, morality, religion, ethnicity, those weren't separate things.
Mm-hmm.
It was all wound up together like one of those ficus trees that,
That's a great image. Yeah.
that's weaved together. So if you're going to take away the justice of God, you're going to take away God, you're almost taking away God himself. You're taking away the foundations of the earth.
Everything's just going to come crumbling down.
Well, you have,
I think it makes life unfair. So I think that they almost want Job to have done something wrong, because otherwise, if they are do-gooders as well, let's say generally speaking, then they will be at risk too if God is coming after people who are following all the rules. So in order to not feel vulnerable and live in fear, they have to say there has to be some justification for this.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they're going to live in terror that they could be next, that life is unfair, that they can lead good lives and be,
and still be victims.
Yeah, and still be victims.
Which is unbearable.
And that's too anxious, too anxiety inducing. They have to. There has to be
That is what he says, happens to the the unwary. They live in terror.
Okay, I came in on this late, but the first part of it, Patty, if you could scroll up for me, please.
Yeah.
Um, um, what I'm hearing Bildad say is, why are you setting yourself up so arrogantly? You're turning yourself into anger? Do you think anything cares? I mean, you really are not that important. I mean, shall the earth be forsaken because of you? No. Why are you being so arrogant? And starting from 5 on, he's describing the wicked, i.e. Job, because this is what's happened to you, so therefore you're wicked.
They are thrust into a net by their own feet, that brought this about yourself. Yeah. Um,
And his his conclusion at the end is that you are ungodly because this is what happens to the ungodly. This happened, and therefore you're ungodly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't believe that, then, then he has no protector against the dark forces.
mm-hmm.
I mean, God is what is protecting him. God is what's holding him, holding them at bay.
But
And if there's no justice in the world, he's screwed.
well, I think Bildad's point is that justice has not been granted him, or rather, it's not a justice thing. This is your punishment for having made done all this questioning and doubting God, and therefore this is clearly what is happening to you. I mean, you're torn from your Trent. You've got nothing left. They're even talking about skin diseases, and therefore, don't be so arrogant, and in demanding questions and thinking you're so important that you deserve answers, because clearly this is happening, because clearly you are unworthy.
Well, Job agrees with him. I mean, nobody questions the theology that God, is doing all this.
Mm-hmm.
The only question is, Job says he doesn't deserve it.
And everybody else says
And
he does.
would like him to explain, would like be someone to explain to him why he does. And everybody else says you're getting what you deserve. Nobody is questioning the fact that God is supposed to punish the wicked. He's supposed to, give you what you deserve. They're just saying the fact that Job's getting it is proof that he deserves it.
Mm-hmm.
And Job is not disagreeing with their theology. He's just disagreeing with them on that one point.
Mm-hmm. I don't deserve this.
Yeah. Other people deserve it, which is a very common thing even today.
You think?
But I don't deserve it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just to go back to verse 4 one more time, it's just the whole idea. The fact that Bildad says this, shall the earth be forsaken because of you, or the rock be removed out of its place? To me, that suggests that, to use Kim's words, some anxiety about, if you keep asking these questions and you want this justice that really isn't a justice thing, you are going to imperil my worldview, our worldview. And so it's like almost like a little chink in the armor to me. It's like that he's, maybe Bildad's not 100% sure, because he's admitting that if Job is right and that he hasn't done something wrong and that he's being punished unfairly, unjustly, then everything that Bildad has built his understanding upon is false, and that whole premise doesn't hold. And so that's really scary, and I think that's true for all of us, that and that's why it's we get stuck in these entrenched positions so often, because to admit that maybe it's not 100% the way we think it threatens the whole structure, which
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to, but I think that's human nature. Um,
I was reading it more as sarcasm.
hmm.
I
Hmm.
maybe I suppose you could be, you could read it as, a just or a legitimate inquiry, but I was reading it more as sarcasm.
Well, even if it is sarcastic, though, it still is suggesting that there is, you know, the earth is a particular way, and Job is calling that into question.
Yeah.
So, even if it is, and I can hear that as sarcasm for sure, but it still suggests to me that, you know, that Job's questioning is threatening, you know, that it's so opposed to the way the world is that it can't be admitted as a possibility.
Yeah.
See that?
Or
All right. Anything else in 18, or shall we move on to Job's reply? Going once, going twice. All right, let's move on. Let's see. Oop, I think there we go. I think my internet connection's not today. Come on. No, that's still 18. There's 19. All right, so now we're going to hear some language that I think will be familiar to many of us. This is a longer chapter, so if someone doesn't want to read the whole speech, perhaps you can share it with someone else. But would somebody like to begin?
I can start.
Thanks, Kim. Read as much as you want.
Okay. How long will you torment me and break me in pieces with words? These 10 times you have cast reproach upon me. Are you not ashamed to wrong me? And even if it is true that I have erred, my error remains with me. If indeed you magnify yourselves against me and make my humiliation an argument against me, know then that God has put me in the wrong and closed his net around me. Even when I cry out, violence, I am not answered. I call aloud, but there is no justice. He has walled up my way so that I cannot pass, and he has set darkness upon my paths. He has stripped my glory from me and taken the crown from my head. He breaks me down on every side, and I am gone. He has uprooted my hope like a tree. He has kindled his wrath against me and counts me as his adversary. His troops come on together. They have thrown up siege works against me and encamp around my tent. He has put up my family far from me, and my acquaintances are wholly estranged from me. My relatives and my close friends have failed me. The guests in my house have forgotten me. My female servants count me as a stranger. I have become an alien in their eyes. I call to my servant, but he gives me no answer. I must myself plead with him. My breath is repulsive to my wife. I am loathsome to my own family. Even young children despise me. When I rise, they talk against me. All my intimate friends abhor me, and those whom I love have turned against me. My bones cling to my skin and to my flesh, and I have escaped by the skin of my teeth. Have pity on me, O you, my friends, for the hand of God has touched me. Why do you, like God, pursue me, never satisfied with my flesh? Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and with lead they were engraved on a rock forever. For I know that my vindicator lives, and that in the end he will stand upon the earth, and after my skin has been destroyed, then in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side, and my eyes shall behold and not another. My heart faints within me. If you say, how will he persecute him? And the root of the matter is found on him. Be afraid of the sword, for wrath brings the punishment of the sword, so that you may know there is a judgment.
Thank you, Kim. Great speech. Okay. So, Where do we want to go? Did anyone, uh, Ray or Fred, did your translations have any interesting differences? I don't think it gets more interesting than pissing on oneself, but
We haven't gotten that interesting, but there.
I have very different, some of them,
here, which verses?
but I should have written them down, but
Okay. Just
We
a
get
couple.
Redeemer instead of Vindicator is,
yes,
Right.
I have Redeemer instead of Vindicator, but
I have defending counsel.
Aha.
Encounter.
This
So
all
let's see.
seems like such a switch for him.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, now I know my Redeemer lives, my Vindicator, my Judge, my court appointed lawyer. He's been all along, he's been doubting that he had anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where is it? Why can't I have one? And all of a sudden, boom, he knows where it lives. I'm a bit jarred by this.
Hang on one second. I want to look at the Hebrew. So I would imagine that for most of us, that speech or that portion of the speech is familiar. I know that my Redeemer lives. Where do we know it?
Handel's
Messiah.
Messiah, among other places,
Ah,
yes.
yes. Yes. And if you've ever been to a burial service in the Episcopal Church, that is the opening anthem that is read as the procession comes into the church. I know that my Redeemer lives, and in my flesh I shall see God. Um, so Redeemer comes from the verb geal, to redeem, act as a kinsman redeemer, so a family member who avenges or steps in to redeem. Um, some connotation about redeeming Israel from slavery in Egypt. Um, so, there we go. I know that my vindicator, my redeemer, the commentary I've been looking at uses the word restorer. Um, so, to Ellie's point, we were just talking a couple minutes ago about how Job was saying last week, I want my advocate to stand up for me. And now he's saying, I know that my vindicator, my redeemer, my restorer is out there. In Christianity, in Handel, who is that redeemer meant to be?
Jesus.
Right.
Jesus, right. So Christianity co-opts this, not for the first time, um, co-opts the Hebrew scripture. But in this context, who is that vindicator or redeemer or restorer?
God.
God,
Well,
there is,
But his persecutor is also God.
right.
Yeah.
And he's been asking for someone to stand with him against God. So is that vindicator God?
Mm-mm.
That's where
In my flesh, I shall see God, whom I shall see on my side. What?
Hang on just a second. I'm going to pull up the burial liturgy in the Book of Common Prayer so we can look at that together. You don't need to see me looking around for it.
while you do that, I also see in the last verses, a judge not lest ye be judged theme.
One sec, I'll pull that back up.
Yeah, I hear that, Fred.
Okay. Yes, if you say, how will we persecute him? And the root of the matter is found in, be afraid of the sword. Wrath brings the punishment of the sword. Yes, so you may know there is judgment.
just muted yourself, Patty.
Sorry about that. All right, so here is the burial office. And you can imagine, anyone who's been to a burial service in the Episcopal Church, I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believe in me shall never die. And then here we pick up Job. I know that my Redeemer, capital R, liveth, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though this body be destroyed, yet shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold, and not as a stranger. So does that seem like a consonant interpretation with what we've got here, or is the church taking it out of context?
Well, I can see that in here. I can hear it. I mean, and just swallowing the whole chapter, it sounds to me that Job has achieved some conviction, or some faith in his own conviction or perception, and that out of this misery, he's rejecting the old theology, and something new that he probably wouldn't yet call a theology has dawned on him that must be true.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us have had to do that kind of metanoia, where we've had beliefs turned inside out, and it takes a while. I mean, Job isn't there yet. He's still a man of his time, but I think he's indicating that he has found another way of looking at these things, other than what his friends are saying.
Well, I think Job believes in himself. He believes that he's been the faithful servant.
Yeah.
And he's willing to understand that God he does believe that God is responsible for these things. And he's seeking an understanding. And I guess he's trying to relay to his friends that, why are you judging me? Because you know how I've lived. This could happen to you in a sense, or, whatever, but
Here
failed him.
Yeah, here is one, because I have a very significant change in translation.
Which verse, Fred?
6.
6, okay.
Where you say, know then that God has put me in the wrong. Mine says, then know that God has wronged me. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a different connotation. Let's see what the Hebrew says.
And that's still consistent with the rest of that verse.
So the Hebrew is more in line with Fred's translation, that God has wronged me. Oh, go ahead, Elliot.
That translation looks like it's meant that has put me in the wrong, has made me wrong, made me a wrongness.
As opposed to, doing me wrong, right? You done me wrong, God. Yeah. It's just, that's why I think this exercise is so helpful, because then we can really start to wrestle with, what are the implications of different translations? And translation is always with an agenda, right? Of whoever's doing the translating. And so, it's interesting to read it that way. Go ahead.
Well, if God has wronged him, then the next few verses start to make sense. Though I cry violence, I get no response. Though I call for help, there is no justice. He has blocked my way so that I cannot pass. He has shrouded my paths in darkness. It just goes on and on about, God has wrong. If God has wronged him, all of these, complaints, start to make a little more sense to me.
Well, that's my point, that the whole thing pivots on verse 6.
Yes.
Know that God has wronged me, therefore he's done me wrong, and therefore he's doing all these terrible things to me. But if you read it that God has created me as a wrong thing, as a wrong person. And then all this list of things that God is doing against him now becomes something that he deserves, because Job himself is recognizing that he is wrong.
Hmm.
I read it the other way, looking at verse 5, where he says, look, you make my humiliations an argument against me. All you guys have been saying, I clearly must be bad because these bad things are happening to me. And what he then says is, no, God did this to me. He put this on me, not because I'm a bad person, but he made all this stuff come down on me.
Well, that's what I've been agreeing with all along, and then all of a sudden this one translation is kind of,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Actually, he's right. I mean, he doesn't know about the
The bet.
adversary and the bet. Yeah, he doesn't know, but he guessed right.
Yeah.
When you say that, Donna, I've been thinking as we've talked about this chapter, how would our reading of Job be different if we didn't have that first chapter, that prose, almost it's like a prologue with the conversation in heaven between God and the adversary. If that didn't exist, and if we didn't have that knowledge either, how would that affect our read of this book? Because I have to go back and really look at the um, history, what scholars think about how the book was actually written down. Um, you know, are those bookends, the beginning and the end, were they added later? Is that sort of a gloss to make all of this hold together? Or was it all written down at the same time? I don't know. So that's worth my investigating because I'm curious about that.
But don't you have to know that Job was an upright man? That by the standards of his religion, he was a good person. I mean, if you don't know that, then the whole thing's a crapshoot. You may have been bad or you may be okay.
Well, that's my point, is that we have this insider knowledge. It's the dramatic irony, right? We know that we know things that Job doesn't know. We know that he's upright. He knows that. But there's so much else that we know that he doesn't know, that he's trying to figure out. And so I think psychologically this book is fascinating because to Ellie's point, it just kind of pivots things. Every time I think, okay, yeah, I agree with this, then there's something else, and then, oh yeah, that makes sense too. It plays games with me, at least.
Well, I feel like Job is coming to the conclusion that these are works of God and that he is being used as an instrument, and he's not sure why yet. And that he's no, of course not. I mean, he's lost everything and it makes no sense, and he's led a good life and all of that. But when he talks about how, like in death, he will be with God or whatever it is, I think that he knows, like because there's no other explanation to him, because he knows his heart and he knows his actions. And he's the only one that knows this besides God, because his friends don't know it, and so he is the one who he doesn't feel guilt, right? He doesn't feel those things that people who do wrong things feel. He feels like he needs this understanding, but I think he knows now that he's being used as an instrument and that it is God who is doing this. So
I don't think there's any doubt God is doing it.
Yeah.
The question is, God in doing this is violating the terms of the agreement that you reward good and you punish evil.
Right.
But the underlying question there is, who wrote those terms of the agreement?
God.
Yeah. So can God violate them?
well, he wrote them, so
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's, in other, in other primitive religions, God and man, gods and man, are in a team to keep chaos at bay.
Right.
The early Hebrews' major innovation was that God was wholly other. But God still made covenants with the Hebrews over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And the Hebrews had quite a time always figuring out why when they didn't seem to be kept, it must have been their fault.
Well, one thing to remember about Job is that even though it was written pretty late in the canon of Hebrew scripture, it's meant to take place sort of in the prehistorical period. So pre Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, it
Pre-covenant.
was written late
Yes, it was one of the later writings. Yeah,
because I'm having a hard time figuring out why they made it scripture at all.
I know.
Mm.
Well, it's fascinating, right? Because it is so unusual in, this whole dialogue with God, about God, calling God into question. Right. Yeah, I know.
But doesn't it point to an alternative to the idea of human action and godly punishment?
Mhm.
There is an alternative, that things happen that are not due to human action. And that is a different view. I mean, than Fred has been describing, I think accurately, for most other
Definitely.
older religions. Yeah, if something goes wrong,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
So, but that's what's so maddening in this worldview is that it doesn't compute to people that how is it possible that bad things happen to good people? And
And why should I worship a God who doesn't do anything for me?
Doesn't play fair.
well, yeah, but is that an option?
Sure it is. Look at what most people are doing Sunday morning.
Right, but I'm talking about in this worldview. Um, you know, so the question that I keep coming back to is even if, to Kim's point, or no, to Donna's point, sorry, even if Job started out purely upright and virtuous and never did anything wrong, is it so virtuous to say that God has closed his net around me? He's walled up my. I mean, he's definitely slinging some accusations against God. And again, I'm not saying that I believe this, but in this worldview, does that then put him on the wrong side of God? When he starts questioning God. And so, does it become sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy? Thinking back to what the adversary says at the beginning, when you start to strip everything away from him, will he be so upright? And this is why I mean it's like a psychological.
Yeah. Will he curse you?
Yeah.
Does this constitute cursing God?
Right.
Is this enough to let Satan win the bet?
Right. Exactly. That's
But I don't think he's blaming God. He's simply listing what's been happening.
I
Yes.
agree. I
I
agree.
agree,
I
Ellen.
feel like he's just kind of stating the facts, that he's not necessarily cursing God or,
No, but he is calling God's justice into question.
exactly. And isn't
Yeah.
that inherently in this
Blasphemous.
again? We may in our so we what we have to do is parse out the worldview of Job from our worldview. And so to us, sure, in our understanding, it's perfectly okay to say, hey God, I'm not happy. Do you know how many times I tell God in the course of a week I'm not happy? We gotta talk about God. Had a lot of reason lately to say that to God. But in this worldview, in thinking according to the rules of this game, to put it that way, is it okay to tell God you're not just? That, I cry to you and there's no justice for me? I'd be very afraid if I were he. Um,
Because couldn't he take the view of, I don't know what I did, but I must have done something
yeah.
because God is just.
And he's not saying that. That's exactly it, Donna. And that's what I find just so interesting about Job.
Well, but I think
well,
he's also saying that, you comforters keep telling me that, yes, I've got boils, my things, and therefore I'm wicked. That's circular. That's a tautology, because I know sitting here that I am not. And that's why I call out for justice, and there isn't any.
Mm-hmm.
So he's sort of, just rejecting this. If you did, if you've got something bad happens, it's because you did something wrong. And I don't know. I mean, the rain falls on the wicked and on the other wicked, and that happens.
Exactly. Well put. Exactly.
It's a theology that he's rejecting, the theology that everything that happens, happens for a reason. And once again, I'll go back to the Buddhists who, have a different philosophy that could probably be summed up best by saying bad things happen.
Yep. Period.
Get over it.
Yeah. I don't know.
That is not allowed in this theology.
Exactly.
I don't know. I'd swallow this a little differently. I look at this is human language. This is human anger. This is, when you strip away that, you are still left with a man who believes that God is in charge.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And is still maybe looking for justice. He may be looking for restoration. He may be looking for death, but
Yeah.
God is still in charge. He does not lose that faith.
Yep.
Yep. He's very faithful, and he's put all of his power. He gives God all the power.
He puts all of his eggs in the God basket, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I'm watching the clock. We're just about out of time, but I wanted to I love these verses here. 23 and 24. Oh, that my words were written down. Oh, that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and with lead they were engraved on a rock forever. Well,
That is metaphor.
they are. They are. And so, yeah, I love that. So whoever did finally transcribe this campfire story, right, puts that into Job's mouth. And I love that. All right, dear ones, any last thoughts on chapter 19? Okay. Thank you for spending this hour with us, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Patty.
Patty.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you all.
everybody.
Patty.
Great. Good
Bye,
to see
everybody.
everyone.
So
Bye-bye.
good to see you.